Hey, it's DIY Gemini, and today we're going to make over this coffee slash tea cabinet that we had for a while, and we're going to upgrade it to a furniture piece that I'm going to be making from scratch. Yeah. Let's get started. This is our current setup for coffee and tea, and it's kind of a narrow space between our island and the wall, and it works okay, but as you can see, there's stuff kind of everywhere, and it's exposed all the time, so it's easy to get messy. All right, so when I've made furniture in the past, they are usually thrift flips that I've had a starting point and just rethinking that object into something else. And I want to really challenge myself and make this specific furniture piece from scratch. So let me show you what I'm thinking. The overall shape for this cabinet is something similar to this all-modern sideboard that retails for over $1,600. I do want to make some edits though, and I may be a little over my head, but where is the fun in playing it safe? So there are going to be 3 sections for the sideboard slash cabinet. The center is going to be shelves where most of the coffee and tea and mugs with a sliding door front. And then there are going to be 2 sides that are going to be consisting of a roller tambour door to reveal more storage. I drew it up in SketchUp and it seems doable, so let's get some lumber. At the home center, I opted for select pine, which is a tad more expensive than say using plywood, which you could totally use and could save a lot of money for this project. I just didn't want to deal with the edge banding later. So I ended up picking one 12-inch wide and 2 10-inch wide boards, both 8 foot long. I also got some 1/2 inch by 3-inch boards for the shaker style sliding doors in the middle. So let's go build. All right, so we are at my parents' house and we're going to be using some of the big tools today just to make things a little bit easier and more square. It just finished super thunderstorming around here, so it's super humid now and gross, so forgive me if I'm really sweaty throughout this video, but I'm excited to get started and see this come to life. So let's get started. I printed my handy steps to keep me on track and we're ready to get cutting. First, let's do the top and bottom pieces of our cabinet by cutting the 12-inch board into around 38 inches long. Next, we're going to cut a curve on both of the ends. One way to do this is with a jigsaw. Another way is to use a router and using a couple passes. And here's what it's looking like so far. Now I can use this curved edge as a guide and clean up the other curves using a flush trim bit. There's a bearing that's going to roll around our template to curve at the bottom, which would then guide our blade to cut at the top piece to match our template. Then our 2 curves will be the same. I then measured 36 inches from the center of the curve to mark the other end and we'll repeat the same curve process on that side. We'll then give everything a nice good sand and then we'll move on to the inner carcass. So the main part of this cabinet where all the shelves are is what I'm going to refer to as the inner carcass. To start the inner carcass, we are going to use the 10-inch wide boards and cut 3 pieces at 28 inches tall for our vertical supports. We'll then take one of those pieces and rip to 8 3/8 inch wide. One of my goals this year is actually learning the table saw, and not gonna lie, the table saw really intimidates me, and thankfully I have my dad to coach me through using it. I still need loads of practice, but it's still very scary to me. The hardest part is keeping the wood plumb to the vents. While we're on the table saw, let's rip the other 10-inch wide board to 8 3/8 to prep the shelves. Then we'll cut those to size using the chop saw, a saw I'm definitely more comfortable with. And at some point in time, I was also intimidated by this saw too, but with time and practice, I get more comfortable with these tools, as I'm sure it will happen with the table saw one day. Okay, here's what we completed for day 1. 2 rounded pieces for the top and bottom, 2 vertical pieces for the edges of our carcass, 1 middle vertical piece, and 4 shelves. Tomorrow we'll be working on the curved shelves for the sides and starting assembly. Day 2 is all about routing our channels and the top and bottom board. With the 1/2 inch inset, we're going to use the same circle jig to cut a 1/4 inch groove along the curve. We'll start from one inch of the half circle mark to the inch past the other end of the half circle in the back. Then we'll use a curve item like this magnet dish. This will be the entrance and exit of how our tambour doors goes in. I later realized that I needed a longer exit point for the doors so that when the doors are open, they have somewhere to go. So I actually extended the exit point all the way to the middle back of our cabinet instead. Next, we're going to replicate that curve into our top piece. I marked the line that indicated the center of our semicircle, and we're ensuring that the right interfaces are facing each other so that the track on both the top and bottom piece will match each other. Now, let's route the grooves for the middle sliding doors. My doors are going to be a 1/2 inch thick, so they're going to be 2 separate grooves, a tad wider than my doors, so 9/16 inch thick, so that the doors have just enough breathing room to slide around. But let's take a brief moment for my parents' cat being so sweet and keeping me motivated.
Hi. Oh, hello. Are you helping me today? Oh, I know. It's so hot, right?
Okay, so back to making the grooves. I made several shallow passes, going a tad deeper with each pass. The eventual depths will be 1/4 inch for the bottom piece and 5/8 inch for the top piece. I'll explain why when we'll get to the doors later. After doing a test run with the 1/2 inch boards, I see that there's a point where this back one kind of sticks, so I'm going to run a couple more passes and making sure that runs smoothly. Figuring out this routing thing took me several hours to figure out because I don't know what I'm doing, so I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. Okay, so today we're working on making the tambour doors. The individual slats can be made from a variety of shapes, but I'm using these pre-cut 1/2 inch, half round dowels that I got online. I needed about 72 of these for both of my doors. First, let's cut them to size. Next, we'll use a simple jig that I've made out of some scrap wood. It basically gives a form for the individual slats to lay together and square with each other. So I laid each dowel down one by one with the flat side facing up and the rounded side facing down. Because it is rounded on the other side, getting them to lay flat was kind of tricky. I also recommend getting some extra as some of them may be warped in some form, like these bouncy ones right here. I do need 2 tambour doors, so I made this jig large enough to fit both at the same time, and I'm just making sure that everything is flat and tightly together as possible without pushing too hard as that starts to push up the slats. Then we'll secure the last part of the jig. This will protect the borders from glue as the top and bottom should be clear and so it could properly run through our grooves. I use a roller to apply the wood glue so that we have enough even coverage and helps prevent adding too much glue that it seeps to the other side of the dowels. Then we'll add a canvas piece a tad bigger than our tambour door, which we'll cut to size later. But I am using the cheap canvas cloth that I got from the paint section at the home center. We'll then smooth out all the wrinkles by hand and using a rounded piece of scrap wood. After about an hour, we're going to take the doors out of the jig. The glue should be dried enough to the canvas, but not enough that the dowel rods are sticking to each other just yet. But we'll make sure to snap all the bonds between the dowels so that each piece is moving independently. We'll then trim the canvas to size. And side note, I did notice some of the canvas fraying the following day, so I applied some super glue at the edges to stop the fraying. We'll repeat these steps with the other door. And by the end of this, the door should be able to be manipulated like so. Super cool. All right, so we've come to a slight issue because I have made some alterations to the plans. According to my original plans, these vertical pieces were supposed to sit flush with the front as this acts as our doorstop for these sliding doors in the middle. However, I had routed the grooves for the middle doors a little wider than my plans so that the middle vertical piece protrudes a little bit into these grooves. Since I've already glued this carcass together, which I definitely should have dry fitted everything beforehand, but here we are. I have to figure out a solution. DIY is always about problem solving as you go. After some brainstorming, I decided to push the whole carcass backwards and add extra half dowels that I had to the edges as trim to fill the gap that was created in the front here. These will be glued to the carcass and remain stationary. And I'm super glad I came up with this solution because it makes it seem like it was already meant to be there. So nobody's gonna know. How will they know? Remember when I said I didn't want to edge band?
I just didn't want to deal with the edge banding later.
Another issue was looking at the edges of my top and bottom piece, and I saw all the mistakes I had with routing and it really started to bother me, so I ended up edge banding around the edge. All right, time to make the last step of construction, the shaker doors for the middle. I have the 1/2 inch by 3 inch wood pine that we're gonna rip up to 2.5 inches instead. and then we'll chop everything to size. For my doors, I want the overall dimensions to be 12 by 28 and 5/16. Yes, I know that's very specific, but I will tell you why that height in a second. These vertical pieces or stiles would be cut to that specific height of 28 of 5/16 inch. And the horizontal pieces or rails will be the overall width minus width of both stiles to get 7 inches as our final length. To assemble the doors, there are so many ways to do this. So with pocket holes or dowels for better alignment, but I'm just going to make sure it's square and glue it up together and keep it simple. All right, let's test fit everything and see if it works. Hey, not bad for no wax in the groove yet. So I can finally see the home stretch, you guys. Let's go. All right, we're finally in the final stages. First, let's attach our inner carcass to our top and bottom piece using the dreaded dowel joinery that I so love. Admittedly, I should have done this after staining and finishing, but again, here we are. Then I'm using a 1/4 inch board to apply a backing to our cabinet. So now we're on to staining and finishing. First, we'll sand everything with 220 grits, and then we'll apply wood conditioner as pine can be very splotchy and accepting stain without it. We're using provincial for our stain color, and then we'll add some finish. Later I realized I still wanted a darker color, so I went over it with another darker stain. After seeing the splotchy stain in the natural sunlight the next day, I applied a layer of gel stain this time in the color dark walnut. After that dries, we'll apply the finish with lacquer. I never used lacquer before, but I know it's good for faster finishing time as you don't have to sand in between coats, and it dries very quickly versus using polyurethane, which can take hours to days for drying and layering and sanding and all of that. With lacquer, I had to make long strokes across the entire surface to make an even finish. To finish out the day, I made some handles using some leftover scrap wood. For the tambour doors, I used a round nose bit to carve out a section to fit over the curve of the dowels. One edge is also longer than the other, so it fits nicely into our tambour door. I also softened all the other edges so that it's all rounded out, and I made similar ones for the middle sliding doors just without the curved underside. While the lacquer dried very quickly, what I didn't account for was the humidity. I noticed the white cloudy areas of the piece, and after searching online what may have caused it, I realized that since the lacquer dries so quickly, it can trap moisture into the piece when the lacquer is drying. To remedy this, I will gently use a heat gun to remelt the lacquer. Then we'll apply 2 more layers on top of the whole thing. Alright, we're done with finish. Look at the lines on my face. Totally necessary though, because this stuff really stinks and you're not supposed to breathe it in, so always a good idea to be safe. Everything is dry, so let's take everything to my house. First, let's attach our back piece. I'm just screwing these on. These will make it easier if I need to maintain anything or fix anything. And then we'll add some brassy gold legs to lift our cabinet up. And then we're going to add wax to all of our grooves to make sure the doors are easier to move about. Speaking of our doors, let's start with our center doors. I got these 2 glass panels custom fabricated at my local glass shop. I really wanted reeded or fluted glass, but they were crazy expensive. So I decided to go with just the plain glass and applying this film to imitate the look. Got these glass retainer clips to keep it in place, and let's install them. Now remember when I said that the upper grooves were deeper than the bottom ones? It's so that we can install the doors by putting them up to the top here and then swinging the doors in like so. And now they can be removed in and out if I ever were to do repairs or need to clean them. And now let's install our tambour doors. And before I show you the final reveal, let me move over all of our coffee and tea stuff into our new cabinet. And let's take a brief moment to remember the coffee station before, just organized and mugs falling over, to now. Okay, we're filming in a really tight space, but I just want to say, like, look at her. Look at her. She is beautiful. I can't believe I made this. It sounds really stupid, but like, I can't believe I like imagined this and now it's built to life and it's here in my house. Yeah, so I basically worked on this a lot of the days after work or my days off from work from my day job. So it took me a lot longer. And also since I don't really know what I'm doing, I'm just learning as I go. So there's so many new techniques to do here. So that's also what took me so much longer than I guess like a practice woodworker would be. But honestly, I am still really stoked on how this came out. I learned so much on this project. As much as I'm really proud of this project, I wish there were some things I did differently, like putting a pattern for the grooves, making a pattern for that for the router, so I'm not like using the circle making jig. I think that would have been more accurate. Second thing, of course, I should have stained before I put all of it together because that would have made staining and finishing so much easier. But nevertheless, we still got here and I'm still super proud of it. I also want to say a special thank you to my dad for guiding me through this project and helping me out and just letting me use his garage and his tools while it was super hot and humid to do it on my little patio upstairs. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Like, can you believe I made this? Because I don't know. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded and I'm really, really sorry. Thank you so much for your patience about it. I was really determined to finish this because this was like on my mind pretty much every day until it was done. So I'm just really glad that it's done. So yeah, there's going to be more behind the scenes content, what I couldn't include in the video on my Instagram and TikTok at Hi DIY Gemini. So go ahead and follow me on there and check that out. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, and I am so excited you are still here after not uploading for forever. So I will catch you at the next one, and I promise it won't be as long as a break as this one. Okay, bye.